Hello and welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. And this week we do have a pretty grounding episode. I think it's really important because of
hmm
a lot of energy we've been feeling that we're going to validate with the astrology as well and kind of give you a heads up for what's coming. We're also going to give you a heads up for what's coming over the next month of episodes because Em and I will be physically in Egypt, but we are preparing ahead of time so that you don't miss any content, you don't miss a beat while we're gone. So we'll give you the information regarding that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I do also just briefly, right up front here, want to give a bit of a content warning just for this
Yeah.
episode. Um, we will be lightly discussing themes of sexual assault, racism, and misogyny during this
hmm
episode. So if you are uncomfortable with that, please be in the right headspace and to listen. We're not trying to discourage you from listening in any sort of capacity. It's not like we're going to get graphic with it at all.
No.
But with the energy that's occurring right now, we feel like it's pertinent to at least offer the trigger warning. And we always want to be really upfront and open about that with all of you, that those themes are going to be discussed. And so you might want to just make sure you're in the good headspace to process that when you listen.
Mhm.
Again, not going to be super graphic or super long or super in depth, but just something that we want to
Nope.
make sure we mention.
Yeah, just light mentions of it in the conversation as needed. Um,
Yeah, including
yeah.
our own stories
hmm
around some stuff. So not
Yeah.
full in-depth stories again, but just
Yeah.
in the ways that we relate. Um, yeah. So just
I'm
gonna
gonna
bring
say,
that
don't
up.
worry. We both have therapists. You do not have to worry about us unloading.
No,
We're good.
no, it's not that at all. And it's not even us describing like necessarily what happened, but just in the
hmm
ways that we are personally coming at certain things that we're going to talk about
hmm
because of our backgrounds and experiences.
Yes. Yeah.
So all that's to say, usually we're not that serious about it, but because we care about you, we
Yeah.
want to make sure that we are when it
Yeah.
comes to this particular episode.
Yeah. I think also because, a lot of us have been feeling this, and I hope that we can validate right off the bat. If you've been feeling um, a lot of challenge, a lot of fiery energy, a lot of confusion, particularly around what's going on in your mind and what's going on in the minds of other people that you thought you understood before, and it's not feeling as clear now, and what that means for your relationships, for compromises or lacks thereof. That's kind of what we're going to lean into right now. And it's because there is astrology to go along with this. And also, we don't need a reason to validate that we're all feeling something and to try and ground it in so that you don't feel so alone.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I guess before we dive into even more stuff, I do just want to say, we mentioned this multiple times, everyone's feeling outside of themselves right now.
hmm
What that means is everyone wants someone else to feel their feelings for them. So deferring blame, not doing a lot of self-reflection, projecting onto other people is a really, really significant and common theme at the moment. You've probably
Yeah.
seen it happen in your life multiple times over the last week or two, where
hmm
people have been like, well, I didn't do that. That's over here. I don't feel that way. You feel that way.
hmm
Pushing that energy outward there. It's a significant thing about this moment in time that people are doing.
Yeah.
It's about to start getting better, thank goodness, which we're going to
hmm
talk about in the astrology.
Yeah.
But also, it is important to note that we are still in the grieving process for a lot of
hmm
things as a collective.
hmm
A lot of stuff changed really, really quickly over the last 6 months. That
hmm
creates a lot of grieving stuff, grieving style energy. And a lot of that also, there's a lot of things changing and shifting really rapidly right now. And that makes us uncomfortable
hmm
on a root level. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. Who does? No one enjoys feeling uncomfortable. That doesn't mean it's not part of the reason that we're here. We are. It's a huge part of the reason that we're here. But it's very easy to want to pass that discomfort on to somebody else. And we implore you to please have the consciousness in your own life when you feel that need to be like, well, this person made me feel this thing. So they need to feel something back. Please pause and digest it first. Vent about it to someone neutral, write about it in a journal, sleep on it even. Just let it process through before you react to it to avoid some of the literal bear traps that are happening with an emotional energy right now. It's on
hmm
such a mass scale, which is part of the reason we're talking about it because it's so many people. You can literally see people online doing it
hmm
in real time. You can scroll through and be like, "Oh my God, this is the thing."
Yeah.
And people are lashing out at people that have felt maybe have slightly different energetic understanding than them, or have felt some a different opinion on something stupid. Something stupid. I mean, it might be, and I mean when I mean something stupid, it might literally be like like it's the equivalent of like having a fight over the paint color on the walls, right? Like
Or the ice
it's
cream
like
flavor that you want to have tonight. Again, like
it's
something
exactly that. And like
minuscule
that's the
or
level.
yeah, the minutia
Hmm.
of details. Because here's the thing, we had a lot of anger, and a lot of the anger came from something we may have done our best to control. Don't discount
Hmm.
everything that you did, but is no longer as much in our control as it was. And so this
Hmm.
anger has to go somewhere. But because we don't feel like we deserve to have it because it's not directly from us, we have to assign it to something. This is why we
Yeah.
tell you to ground and shield your energy, because if you have a lot of empathic intuitive ability, you will get this just
Hmm.
walking around, especially like I like to say at a gas station or at a county fair.
Yeah.
You're getting,
Hmm.
or if you go to like a convenience store, if you go
Hmm.
out to any of those department stores, you're getting everybody's energy. And then suddenly you come home and you're super cranky and you don't know why you're mad, but you're mad and it's got to go somewhere. And so the fact that this person is chewing too loud ticks you off. And so now
Hmm.
we're in that space where a lot of us are in a sense of anger, trying to tell ourselves that we shouldn't be angry because anger is whatever, a negative emotion. It is not. It is a
Hmm.
step in the process of processing things. It is necessary. It's literally one of the stages of grief because it should be acknowledged.
Hmm.
And we are in a collective moment where a lot of us were in shock. A lot of us were surprised. A lot of us then had to come into a little bit of denial. I know I saw that on social media.
Hmm.
And then we're coming into the next phase of this isn't in my control. I don't know what to do. And now that I'm feeling change happening around me that I don't want, my resistance is to be angry. But I don't have any direct thing, again, like I said, with the
Hmm.
anger. So it has to be directed at somebody. It's going to be the next person. I actually, in my own space, had to do this. There was a conversation
Hmm.
between me and my partner in January where one of the things I had to acknowledge was I was outsourcing my fear on him.
Hmm.
And we had to like have a conversation and take that into back into control, take responsibility on my side, take responsibility on his side. I brought it to my therapist and we talk about it. It's not fully resolved yet. I'm going to admit that
Hmm.
we are all in a space where stuff is happening and it's continuing to happen, and the lack of closure doesn't help, right? There's a lot of
Hmm.
things that are still in the air. And then on top of all of that, of course, this is the time for this to be happening. And I say this is the time for this to be happening because the astrology is really of this energy as well.
Yeah. It really, it very, very much is. I've said this so many times, and I'll say it again. I don't even remember if I talked about it on the podcast or not, but like being a content creator right now is like jumping into a pit of snakes.
Yeah.
It truly is because, and speaking just to my personal content, this is happening across all sectors. It's not just the spiritual sector. So let me just like
Mm-hmm.
preface that right up front because it's happening with, I've talked to friends that are in every style of content creation. This is occurring because if I post, if we post something that is just like a bland spiritual tip, whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
I get the comments like, well, what about this? Aren't you talking about this in the world? And what about do you think about this? And blah, blah, blah. And well, I disagree with this tip because it's easier to fight with the tip than it is to actually engage with things that are scary. So then there's that. Now, if I post something about what's happening in the world and the spirituality of that, then I get a bunch of people like, well, I disagree with this part of it, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that, trying to again police my content because they're feeling uncomfortable by what's going on around. When again, it is a minute and a half to 2 minute snippet of something that is occurring. Then, on the other side of that, even further, if you try to engage with any of those things, then it spirals out of control even more. So it is just a non win. No one can be satisfied right
Mm-hmm.
now in that space. And it's because a lot of people are very unconsciously doing exactly this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who to be angry at, but this person said one part of this thing that makes me really uncomfortable. So I'm going to throw it out there because that makes me mad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's just with all content creation right now. And it is so exhausting. And I know, like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, be a content creator. I'm just saying that is the level of which that we're experiencing it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Is every like I'm avoiding comment sections like the freaking plague on my own stuff. And so is everybody because it's not good right now. Like it's really rough because again, people are not internally processing, they're externally processing and not in the greatest, most healthiest ways.
Mm-hmm.
All that's to say, if in your personal life you're noticing this, yeah,
Yeah, it's everywhere.
yeah.
It's all of us. And,
Hmm.
normally I'd be like, so give everybody grace. You're aware of it now. They're not. No, 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 not this time. You are still in your process too. Give yourself grace. Give yourself the ability. Like one of the things, again, I was talking about with Dan was like, we need ways of processing this that don't end up having us turn our energy on each other. We're probably going to take up kickboxing or something, just something that I can hit, something that he can
Yeah.
hit that doesn't hurt people and gets out that physical as well as emotional
Mhm.
stress or even aggression that is pent up because we are conscious and responsible human beings. We know we don't hit other people, but there's something that needs to uncoil. So we got to figure out how to let that out.
Yeah. On that note, too, we really wanted to talk about address some things we said in last week's episode. So we're going to bring that up very intentionally because we've
Mhm,
talked about it at length. So
mhm.
first of all, in last week's episode, was it last week? It was last week.
Yeah, it was last week.
Okay, just make sure. We essentially said how much we do not support the Joe Rogan podcast.
Mhm,
Now, first we want to say we are sorry if that made you feel very much like we were attacking you if it is something that you have engaged in and listening to the podcast. That's not the intent,
mhm,
at all. And if it is something you're engaging with consciously, and that is the choice you want to make, by all means make that choice. We're not going to sit here and judge you and hate on you for doing that choice specifically
mhm,
at all. That's not our vibe. That's not what we're going to do. However, what we also said in the podcast very clearly is that he supports the aforementioned at the beginning of the podcast
mhm,
ideological stances that we are very opposed to. And
mhm,
in order for, we understand a lot of our listeners do listen to his show and maybe don't fully understand, and maybe you do, and that's fine too. And again, we're not
mhm,
coming at you specifically, but don't understand the full reasoning why we speak out so actively against, or we spoke out so actively against him, and we don't engage
mhm,
with his things. Um, because we know that he does have spiritual people on there on occasion, and
mhm.
there are also other viewpoints, which we addressed in last episode too. Of hey, sometimes there's a guest there. However, with him specifically, we have serious problems with who he is as a person and how he engages with the world as a person.
Mhm.
So that's where those comments came from, and we're going to highlight some of those things and why we feel that way. But just know that now is it's not meant as an attack to our listeners. It was meant as an attack to him, and an
Okay.
ability, and hopefully as a way to engage our listeners with thinking more critically about the media that they're consuming
Yeah.
in regards to spirituality in general.
And to that point, not even as an attack to him, but as a criticism of the format and the information that he,
Yeah.
as a source of information, gives out. We have always stood by the fact that we are contributing to your research. We are just
Hmm.
one resource of information that hopefully leads to other things, kind of like an index or a
Yeah.
library, right?
Hmm.
But everything that you choose to take in is a contribution to your research. None of
Hmm.
them owns your perspective. None of them owns any part of your identity, least of all us, least of all any other host out there, including the Joe Rogan podcast. And so, what we want you to understand is we are criticizing this source of information, not to have a dig at anybody here who listens to it, but to encourage a moment of question as you're going deeper into a resource. We would do this for the Bible. We would do this for fiction books that we do or do not like. We would do this for nonfiction books that we do or do not like. For movies, you hear us talk all the time about conscious content consumption, where high vibe books are the things that we support. We talk about whether a book is high vibe in our bookend episodes. The high vibe part of that is that it supports a magical and healthy mental state.
And
Some
growth.
things do not. And some things we find, in our opinions, to be a
Hmm.
denser kind of energy that is not helpful for continuing your research. Now, if you're considering it research and you're saying, this is a resource that I am listening to this episode because I want to understand this perspective better, and you're not allowing that necessarily, as you shouldn't with any resource, whether it's the Bible, this podcast, or another podcast, no resource should have control over how you think and believe. No single
Hmm.
resource should have that.
No.
So we want you to just understand that we are criticizing a resource, just like in peer review with scientific papers or book reviews. There is the criticism of something in order to make sure that everybody gets both sides of the story.
Additionally, your energy has weight and value. And so if you are aligning your energy with listening to something or engaging with something that maybe harms a lot of stuff, your energy is adding weight and value to that. And
Hmm.
that is a personal choice. If you want to make that choice for if it's benefiting you or XYZ thing, that's completely on you. As long as you're
Hmm.
not intentionally harming others, that would be a huge line in the sand for us right here in this
Hmm.
community because we have a duty to you guys to make this a safe space for the people that it is a safe space for the
Hmm.
marginalized communities that we can talk to, for queer people, for magical people, for spiritual people, for women. Like, this is what we foster here. Your energy has weight, and the content you consume, your weight gets applied to.
Hmm.
We don't take that lightly at all on a personal level, and also understanding that your weight is now applying to like you are
Hmm.
contributing to our message too. That is huge to us. That means a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
um I'm going to speak objectively about this a little bit, and this is just in my opinion. um Joe Rogan is a really bad person objectively, and I'm just going to be honest about that. Again, in my opinion, a while ago, this is pre 2020, I did engage with some of his stuff. I watched his spirit module documentary on, I believe it's on Netflix or something, because as someone who has partaken in DMT, was seeing his opinions on that for sure. And he does have some meaningful guests on there on occasion, especially pre 2020. There was a lot of that kind of going on. He has always been, since Fear Factor and probably before, a misogynist openly and without apology, a racist openly and without apology, and like a homophobe openly and
Hmm.
without apology. His most recent stand-up special, which was this year or last year, 2024, was almost entirely jokes aimed at harming the LGBTQ community. Like, it was so significantly anti-queer and anti-LGBTQ. That is concerning to me as a person. Things that he has talked about and laughed about and made jokes about, not just in a, oh, it's just a joke, but talking. The one thing I remember, this one episode, and it hurt me so bad. And again, remember the trigger warnings here, but he was interviewing a man who was a comedian, and that comedian talked about, in order to get, if a woman wanted to perform on his stage, woman had to agree to do specific acts with that man in order to do that. And he was telling stories of how many women he'd done this to, and Joe Rogan laughed about it repeatedly and thought it was hilarious and thought it was a great on his podcast. And then when he was put on blast for it, he simply retweeted multiple times the man's defense of himself. No apologies, no caring there. And that, to me, as a rape survivor and a sexual assault survivor, is a huge
Hmm.
fucking problem.
Hmm.
That's not okay. And the guests that he has on there and the perspectives that he shares are all right. Like, there's that noise in the background no matter what he's sharing. That is a philosophy that is in his mind that he is okay with,
Hmm.
as because he has said he is okay with. His actions have shown us he is okay with it. He continues to say misogynistic horrible things. He continues to perpetuate really harmful narratives. He one time said something about, like, he was surprised Planet of the Apes didn't happen in Africa because that's where black people are. Like, he has said horrific things, and not been not apologized, not grown from that. I'm not saying that the people he has on his show are all that way. I'm not saying the people that listen to his show are all that way. I don't believe that. That would be
Hmm.
short-sighted
Yeah.
completely. He, however, has actively caused harm to me
Hmm.
because of things like that. It has harmed me. It has harmed you. It has harmed people in our communities. And we can't sit here and see that on our wrapped and be like, whoa, what? That's a
Yeah.
man perpetrating harm on purpose and not say something.
Yeah. And honestly, when we saw that on the Wrapped, it was a gut check for us of, are we appealing to the right people? Are we making sure our message is a safe space? When we talk about grounding and shielding, we are talking about that energetically for an individual, but we want this podcast to be your spiritually podcast for grounded people. And we want to be a safe place where you feel shielded from a lot of the hate that is happening right now. And so, in order to do that, we have to put up certain shields. We have to put up certain barriers. We have to hold certain boundaries. And with that, we hold ourselves seriously accountable for our own energetic signature, for what we say. We try to be conscious as much as possible.
Hmm.
And it is so important to us that the people who also feel directly hurt by these things have somewhere where they can feel safe, seen, and included. And,
Hmm.
I come from a childhood where I was engrossed in politics before the age of 10. I remember in the Bush Gore uh,
Era.
situation, yeah, whatever
Hmm.
that was. Um, Brain surgery was not the worst thing that happened that year in my life, because what happened was Al Gore was running for president, and the whole city that I grew up in, which I was involved in a lot of because like my family's engrossed in this thing for 200 years back, and my church and everything was just there. The animosity was thick, right? And I remember talking to my grandma who liked Al Gore. I didn't know anything about this guy. I was 10, but she liked him. And dad took me away from that space and said, she's just going senile. Don't listen to her. And politics encouraged someone to tell me that someone in my family was going. She wasn't, by the way, to the day she passed. She never was. But that's what I was engrossed in. My home had the background to the tune of Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and all of these things. And so for me to see that after this kind of thing tore apart my family, after my
Hmm.
words were twisted and put into a documentary that then supported Trump in that documentary. It
Hmm.
exists. I hate it. My words and my choices and my perspectives and my worldview were twisted for so long that I actually have to remove myself from those things, because it's a little bit of a trigger for me to be in that kind of atmosphere, because I don't want to get sucked in again. I don't want to let my guard down so much that I start trusting that again. And
Hmm.
so that is something that if you're anything like me, if you're deconstructing that kind of life, which I know a lot of us are,
Hmm.
we need to have that safe space where we're not, where we know like this is the bubble that we can stay out of that bubble. There is something to be said for a sacred boundary, and that is one of the things that we're trying to create here.
Hmm. Also, on that note too, be very conscious of who you are contributing money to, even though you're not paying.
Yeah.
Your
Ugh.
views, your data, those contribute money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're very, I mean, we all kind of across the board, we're like, J.K. Rowling's a bad person buying used
Yeah.
only right now. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
are buying something that's maybe the money will go back to her, you're thinking about it, you're intentional about it, you
Mm-hmm.
understand that that's what's going on, and having that intention is important. You then understand to maybe, block your energy so she doesn't get the energetic impact, or under like engage with intention, because we are sitting within systems that we will have to engage with people and beings we dislike and give them money.
Mm-hmm.
For example, Amazon. Yes, we don't want to buy from Amazon. Amazon's not great, we know that. That is funding a billionaire. They have horrible work practices. They are also funding the MAGA side of gross. However, sometimes we need Amazon for certain things
Mm-hmm.
because we have set the capitalism systems up to do that. It's like when TikTok was going away and people are like, well, if Meta buys it, I'm going to delete my account, or I'm not going to Meta, whatever. That's great. I love that philosophy. If it was an organized on a mass scale, it might do something. However, oftentimes, if you're just like, well, I'm just disengaging, then you're disengaging and you can no longer access the tools we have at the moment to build movements, to make change, those types of things. Even if they're tools we don't like, we got to use the tools we have available to us. Like a
Mm-hmm.
screwdriver with a broken handle is better than no screwdriver at all. Like that's what we kind of got to stick with. And so it's that intention that we're trying to get you to like, that's why we brought it up, is because it's very important to engage with intention and on purpose. If you're like, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm still going to engage with this podcast. Rock on. We don't care.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we truly don't care. Go for it. Like,
Yeah.
we support you. We just are hoping that you have that intentional understanding. Now, if you didn't know this stuff before, please go research it. We touched the baby surface of the depths of pits that is him. And some of his takes are not all horrible.
Mm-hmm.
He's very, very pro abortion, probably because he's made a lot of women get them. That's a total facetious thing for me to say, to be totally honest, but I'm just going off of vibes. And again, I can see energy. Does his energy look good? No, it does not. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look great. It looks very, very black hole. It's very self centered, which is not surprising. If you've listened to anything or seen anything that he's ever done, that's what it is. On a, so there's that kind of energy. We go for it. If you're doing it, as long as you're doing it consciously, that's amazing. We're fine
Mm-hmm.
with that. The other thing I do just want to say, though, also is Krista and I have been in this field, the field of spirituality, for a very long time. On my side, there is more misogynism or misogynistic
Misogyny.
ideology. What the fuck? I don't know. In the spiritual community than most people understand because if they
Hmm.
have not been in it a long time.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is for years, the main voices were men and are men still.
Still.
If you look at
Hmm.
like think places like Gaia, it's 80% men.
Hmm.
Like shows with men on them, etc. Despite the fact that spirituality, historically, ancient times, whatever, has been focused very heavily on women and non-binary people and the interspirit people and those types of things, that has been, but again, misogyny, resources, that's the chain, that's how it works, right? Like they've been given more opportunities, they get more opportunities, they grow. Like that's just there. So there's been a lot of that. What has been so personally frustrating for me, having grown up in California in communities of, mind altering substances, and I'm right near San Francisco, so like hippies and the green rush, which was just
Hmm.
like the gold rush, except people came out to California to grow weed. Those spaces, the amount of men who will have one spiritual experience while on some type of mind altering substance, and then will now come at you like they've understood the world because they've gotten a first time experience with empathy is so infuriating.
Hmm.
It is painful. And unfortunately, a lot of these spiritual takes or the spiritual perspective that Joe Rogan has reads like that in a lot of ways, kind of across the board. And again, I've engaged with this for so many years pre his podcast and those types of things of, like I said, documentary takes that he's had and those types of things. It is very, well, I know right because I've done it this amount of time and I'm going to talk to other men who've also done it. And then this is what we're presenting. For me personally, on a spirituality level, that is unaligned.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is unaligned with me.
And I know we it's a very trendy thing to talk about the patriarchy in this moment of history, but this is not a new concept. Every single ancient document I read has a footnote where it says women are not referenced in this, probably because of the patriarchal structures of their society 2000, 5000, whatever years ago. We do not
Hmm.
have many gospels that even mention women, let alone are read by them, especially if you're not reading the ones that, or especially if you're only reading the ones that were put into the Bible,
Hmm.
as it is for especially Protestant denominations. We have all but zero, I swear, astrological resources that even include women. And if you read things like Maternus, who was writing in the Fall of Rome, everything around Venus was bad because that's the only female indicator that isn't the moon, and they have to like the moon because it's necessary to other things. We
Hmm.
have in the history of alchemy, there's one alchemist, I believe she called herself Cleopatra, obviously, as a title, perhaps the Cleopatra. We don't know yet because nobody recorded the history. Nobody wrote
Yeah.
more about it except for what she wrote for herself, hoping and I guess expecting that posterity would take care of that. And it did not. It was not stewarded to this era. And so
Hmm.
we're still dealing with that. It's not new, but we are struggling against millennia right now to try and turn that corner. Go us. Amazing. We have a long journey ahead of us, but we are doing it. And I want us to continue doing that, not to turn the tide and flip the coin, but to balance it out. I
Hmm.
say this about right now there's a table and everybody sits at it. But if you look at like the world stage, America's dancing on the table and they need to sit down. If you look at the world stage, men are dancing on the table, they need to sit down. Christianity is dancing on the table, they need to sit down. There's a lot of situations where everybody should be talking at the table, but some chaotic entity of that whatever you're talking about is dancing on the table and being really loud about it, and they just need to sit down so that everybody can have a say. That is my dream. That's what I'm
Hmm.
hoping for. And with this energy of Aquarius that we have here, not the age of Aquarius, we've talked about this, but with the energy of Aquarius that we are really focusing on for a couple hundred years, I hope to see strides to that effect. And I want to be a part of that change. And this is one of the ways that we're going to be doing it. And this
Hmm.
hasn't even touched yet on the planetary energy that's bringing all of this up.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can circle around to that. Just on final notes there, like we're not doing this to trigger you. We're not trying to
Mhm.
attack you. Like this isn't that at all. We're not supporting you if you listen to us and to him. That's not what's happening. Um, but we hope that this at least gave you more consciousness into what you're engaging into, because oftentimes, especially if you're used to a space, it's hard to flag these subtle things that are
Hmm.
being said and thrown in. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily being manipulated by them, but that also doesn't mean that you might not, I mean, it means you might not want to actually align with that if you do start to notice those things. And the
Hmm.
biggest thing that we can do here is just we want you to notice those things.
Yeah.
If you're engaging with it, please notice, please pay
Hmm.
attention, and please understand if there is boundaries that you need to have for your own like mental well-being. You should listen to those.
Yeah. And
You
truly
should
right
listen
now
to them.
it's hard to try to find something that isn't problematic in one way or another. So we want to
Hmm.
acknowledge that. But
Totally.
we got to do our best. We got to do our best as much as we can. I
Yeah.
was bringing up before the podcast the whole Neil Gaiman situation and how that
Mm-hmm.
made me sad because Good Omens 3 or the final
Finale.
kind of special episode of Good Omens
Mm-hmm.
is coming out and David Tennant's in it. I support David Tennant. I really like David Tennant. But then the Neil Gaiman stuff came out and I'm like, "Oh no. Should I not watch this because he's going to get royalties?" Then they said that his royalties are actually going to be donated elsewhere. So I'm like, cool, I get to do this. But it's very much that your energy is more powerful now than ever. How
Mm-hmm.
cool that our energy is more powerful now than ever. What we're struggling with is now we have the responsibility to be stewards of it. And
Yeah.
that's going to take some time and it's going to take some conscious effort. But boy, is it worth it for how powerful you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we had a couple of people write to us or make comments saying that they were uncomfortable with that. So we wanted to make sure that we just
Yeah.
clarified where our stance is with that. And if that means that you don't feel comfortable engaging in this community or you need to take some time away from that, that's fine.
Hmm.
We totally understand.
Hmm.
Your energy has weight, and if you don't feel like you want to apply that weight here, that's okay. We understand. Marry meet. We will send all the love towards you as you
Hmm.
figure out what feels best for you. Truly.
Yeah.
We hope it doesn't, of course. We would like you to
Yeah.
stay here.
We want you
But
here.
but truthfully, if that's the case, that's okay. We're not someone is ever going to come in and be like,
Let's see.
stay, stay, stay.
To quote Kristoff in Frozen
Hmm.
2, our love is not fragile.
No, our love is not fragile. We love you regardless.
Hmm.
Um, don't go perpetrate harm, please.
Hmm.
That's the best we got. But yeah, all that was we just wanted to make sure that you're engaging with it critically, and maybe you didn't have all the information, and hopefully now you at least have some more.
Hmm.
And if that doesn't feel good to you, that's okay.
Hmm. And these are good steps to take when you're engaging with anything, especially over the next few years. The astrology people have been talking about had a lot of change happening in 2025, and honestly, also in 2026. I did
Mm-hmm.
release an Aries Ingress kind of overview for 2025 on my YouTube, which you can check out. It goes into a lot of the details, but it is a year of intensity and change. And so
Yeah.
it's going to behoove us to really understand that if we're coming into an Aries Ingress that is cushioned between two eclipses, which are like celestial signals of power, we're going to have to really own our own power.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of, like I said, responsibility there, to quote what Uncle Ben from Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Magic is becoming real, like very
Real,
tangibly and very
real.
fast.
Hmm.
To the point where the other day someone was mentioning like a thing to me and they were like, oh, is it a shift in the timelines? And I was like, I actually think you just made that happen.
Yeah,
I don't think that was a timeline shift. I think magic is becoming so real so quickly. I'm like, that doesn't look like timelines. That looks like you just
did
poof
that.
something, pulled something in. And that's like the space that we're at, which is
Hmm.
cool. And it's going
Yeah,
to be daunting in a lot
yeah,
of ways. It's a lot to kind of process through too.
yeah.
On that note, though, this week we've got some cool planetary stuffs.
Duff.
Do you want to talk about those?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we have going on this week, which is putting the final touches, you guys celebrate with me. Mars is going direct on February 23rd. Mars is
Lucky
already
Mars.
right? Mars is already on the degree, which he will stay at to station direct. So he's been moving backwards, right? So he's gotten onto the degree at 17 degrees of Cancer, where he will stop and move forward. We're already there as of the recording this Monday, the 17th of February. We're going to stay there for a while. This is where Mars is hanging out. When a planet stations direct or retrograde, this is actually what traditional astrologers would have said is like the most important part of the retrograde. December 6th was the station retrograde of Mars. And a lot of stuff happened in the week leading up to that and after that. I encourage you to like just Google that and you'll find details there, or check out my live from February 17th. We did talk about it. And again, I go into it in my content. But that's not the only thing that's happening. We have a stationary Mars, which only happens every 2 years or so, right? And then we have Venus who is going to retrograde 4 days after Mars goes direct, which means she is coming to her stationary degree for her retrograde. So we have the two planets, Mars and Venus. The Mars, if you want to call him like the aggressor, the warrior archetype, right? Standing
Mhm.
still, and Venus, the lover, standing still. We have Aries and Aphrodite standing still in the sky right now. And of course, that creates a lot of pent up energy around that. Now, there are several ways that that can manifest, but we're seeing it a lot in the I want to outsource my emotions. I have feelings, I have anger, I'm going to put it out into my relationships or something to that effect. Now, Venus is going to go retrograde and Mars will start moving on. Mars is going to be in a sign that he doesn't like to be until April 17th, which is after Venus stations direct. But what we have in this time is at least Mars is moving forward. So we don't have that friction of the backward
Mhm.
movement of Mars. We only have Venus to be later joined by Mercury, but we don't worry about that as much because Mercury is, of course, retrograding like 4 times a year. So we're more used to it. The unique thing about this, though, is Mars retrograded in the sign of his fall, least favorite sign for him. Venus is going to retrograde starting out in Aries, her detriment. Mercury later in March will retrograde in the sign of their detriment. And so there's a lot of planets that just aren't in their happy places right now. You know, Jupiter is direct again, but still in the sign of his detriment. Um, so aside from the Sun and Saturn, all the planets are in their cranky spaces. So that means that a lot of our areas of life that are governed by these planets, or at least correspond to what these planets influence, are in their cranky places. So give yourself a little grace, give other people grace, make sure you have healthy outlets, make sure you are witnessing your feelings, feeling your feelings, and that you are honoring your feelings so that your relationships, if something needs to be addressed, gets addressed and grows stronger, or if something needs to be
Mhm.
walked away from, is walked away from in peace. And by mid-April, hopefully things will feel a lot better.
Mhm.
We also have two eclipses in that time and the Aries ingress, so it's going to be a year.
I will say with like all of the plan. Oh, and there's a ding on the computer that made the
Uh-oh.
sound. That's good. That's a good thing. We like validation. But I will say too, kind of on that note, when I look at the energy of this week, it's not the worst energy we've seen by far.
Mm-mm.
It's relatively stuff is moving. It's going to move very quickly. It's a very fast moving week. Like very much if you've ever floated a river and there's that one section where you're like, I think I'll be okay on this, but this is a
The
little bit
rapids.
tense. But on the
Hmm.
other side, it's a little bit of a calm kind of pool for that, like you splash into. It doesn't even have to be full rapids. It can just be one of those sections where you're like, wait, stuff is moving
Hmm.
real fast right here. Like I'm gonna buzz on through. Best not drop my phone. That's the space that we're kind of in with this week when I look at it. It's just
Hmm.
like like there's a lot of that happening. It is a week of discomfort. There's a
Hmm.
lot of uncomfortable energy over the next couple weeks, which isn't the worst energy in the world. It's just
No.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So just make sure that you're directing the feelings you do have to the appropriate places where they deserve to go. Because your feelings are freaking powerful. Use those.
Hmm. Yeah.
Use them for sure.
The
Make
feelings
sure
are where
you're
the magic
using
comes
them,
from.
yeah, make sure you're using them in the direction you actually want to use them, though. Like
Hmm.
that's the kind of cautionary tale with
Yeah.
that.
This is why we're saying
Hmm.
channel your energy into something constructive or useful or helpful. Make sure that you're not bleeding on the people who didn't cut you.
Yeah, for sure.
Did not
And
expect to say
that's
that.
not just talking about that's like in your personal life. We're not like
No,
don't bleed on us. We don't
no,
care. Bleed on
no,
us
no,
if you
no,
want to bleed
no.
on us. But
Yeah,
like
I'm already over
that's
that.
what we're saying.
Yeah.
But just if in your personal life, and notice if someone's bleeding on you that you shouldn't be bleeding on you, that is a time for boundaries. Like
Hmm.
very much so.
Yeah.
Very much
Oh,
so.
phone just went off, by the way.
Seems.
Validations everywhere
Um,
right now.
yeah, we will be traveling.
Mhm.
Really quick, we do know that there's a lot of concern right now about travel. We have done episodes before of how to prepare for travel.
Mhm.
Remember your spiritual hygiene, ground yourself, clear your energy, talk to your planes, get comfortable, follow your guides, listen to your intuition. Personally, I'm feeling fine with travel at the
Mhm.
moment, but I
Yep.
just know that there's a lot of that going on. So just to address that very briefly, like you do have tools. We do have previous episodes about that as well
Mhm.
of spiritual things to do to prepare for travel that will really help you.
Mhm.
Um, but we're going to Egypt, and so it's going to be a little funky on the podcast for the next couple weeks because we're going to
Yep.
be in Egypt for basically 3 weeks,
Yes.
which is a long time.
Yeah. And we are excited for each and every single one of you that is going to
Hmm.
be on that trip. Just so you know, we love you all. We're excited to see you. We can't wait for you to have the best time ever.
Yeah, it's going to be so magical. Um, what are you looking forward to most, I guess? What is the thing that's
Me?
screaming at you right now about Egypt?
Oh,
Because this happens with all of our trips. There's always one thing that, and it's never, I mean, sometimes it's the same for both of us, but usually it's our own
mhm.
thing where we're like, my guides are making this the most exciting. Like I'm getting screamed at over here.
Yeah. I when I look ahead and I think about Egypt, I see I don't know if it's Luxor or Aswan. I think it's Aswan. I think something happens in Aswan.
Yeah, you're
Or
feeling excited
maybe
for that.
one week it's Luxor and the next week it's Aswan. I don't know. Because
Yeah,
Luxor is where Sekmet energy is the highest, right? So I
yeah.
usually just default to Luxor. But there's something in Aswan as well.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I love Luxor in general. On that note, though, for me, Hatshepsut's temple is screaming at me to the
Hmm.
point where I've cried about it a couple times. I don't know what is there for me that I need to go so bad, but it's a little ridiculous how
Hmm.
much I am very much looking forward to just going and being in that space again, which I loved last time. It's an incredible,
Yeah.
powerful, beautiful energy and very activating, but there's something about it this time. I'm like, that I'm looking forward to going back to that specific place more than anywhere else.
Yeah. I think we're going to encounter her more this time, considering the new tone
Yeah.
of the world since last
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a
Maybe.
lot to
I
learn
don't
from
know.
her because she was
Hmm.
an excellent queen. Well, she was an excellent pharaoh. She called herself
Yeah.
pharaoh, so I will respect
Yeah.
that.
Excellent Pharaoh. Incredible Pharaoh.
Hmm.
I don't know. There's something there, and it's
Hmm.
like palpable how much it's driving me. Plus, people, I'm so excited to hang out with
Yeah.
all of you. If you're
Yeah. I
coming,
just
so excited.
the mingling with everyone part of it is my favorite thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. On that note, too, we will be sharing tons about Egypt while we're in Egypt, so please pay attention to our social media channels. I'm going to try to even
mhm.
put out some YouTubes literally in Egypt if I can make it, manage it. That they're probably going to be a little bit messy, but I'd like to get that done. So all the places we will be doing that a lot. As far as on the podcast, we have a guest that's going to
Yes.
be on one of the episodes, and then two of the episodes are going to be lives. So when you're listening to this, if you're listening to this on Thursday, I'm doing mine Thursday night
Yep.
live.
And that will then
Um,
be posted
later.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
posted in a couple weeks. But if you want to hop on, ask
Hmm.
questions, whatever,
Yeah.
please do.
You
And
can be a part
that
of
will
an
be
episode.
posted as a podcast episode. Yeah, you'll be on an episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. It will be on TikTok. I will be doing it on TikTok.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I will be doing a live next Monday on YouTube where we will be going over the details of Venus retrograde to prepare for it, and maybe even also diving a little bit into the Aries ingress and that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of big astrology happening right now.
Yeah.
So we'll dive into that kind of stuff
Mhm.
together, and I will be there answering your questions in real time. If you've got questions, we will be handling all of that, and it will be a podcast episode. So I'll make sure extra sure to say people's names out loud if you want, so that you can be included in the episode out loud.
Yeah. And it's also next week is also the last new moon before eclipse
The
season too.
eclipses. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there's some energy. We got some
Yeah,
energy.
it's
Um,
happening.
yeah. So anyway, that's what it's going to kind of look like for the next couple weeks. So it's not going to be our traditional podcast episodes so much, but they're still going to be podcast episodes, and they're going to be fun, and they're going to be different cool
Yes.
energy kind of hanging
Hmm.
out there. So yeah, if you want to participate, you can totally participate that way. And yeah, we really appreciate you all, and we want to be really
Hmm.
clear about that. We do. We appreciate you all so much. Thank you for sharing this space with us, and um we appreciate you choosing to take your time to listen to us,
Hmm.
if that feels aligned with you. But that is of a lot of value to us.
Hmm. You matter to us a ton.
Hmm. Absolutely. Awesome. So let's go. What?
Go
Go
make
make some
some
magic.
magic and spoiler for next
Stuff,
week.
stuff just chaotic. Bye,
Oh,
everyone.